Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we are diving deep into something emotional, something personal, and something that happens way more often than we talk about: a family fight during hospice care. If you have ever been by a loved one's side at the end of life, or if you are preparing for that journey right now, this is a video you need to see. It is based on the honest and heartfelt words of professional hospice nurses and doctors with decades of experience. The first nurse on our list is Julie McFadden, a professional hospice nurse with decades of experience and the author of Nothing to Fear. She has seen it all: the pain, the confusion, the family breakdowns. And today we're going to break down exactly why families conflict during hospice and how you can handle it with love, clarity, and strength. Let's get into it. The end of life changes everything. Julie explains it clearly. The end of life is a disruption. It flips everything upside down. For most people, it is new, unfamiliar, and yes, it can be scary. 1 minute life is moving along as usual. Then the doctor says the treatments are not working anymore. Hospice is recommended, and everything shifts. At that moment, families come together, but not always in peace. Often, they come with questions, opinions, and emotions running high. Sometimes that leads to arguing, blaming, guilt, accusations, and sometimes a full-blown fight. Julie has seen this more times than she can count. And guess what? According to Julie, it is normal. Here is a situation Julie says she sees all the time. Usually, there's one family member who's been the primary caregiver, the person taking mom or dad to doctor's appointments, managing medications, and sitting through those tough medical conversations. This caregiver carries a huge emotional and physical load. When the doctor finally recommends hospice care, this caregiver has to break the news to the rest of the family. And suddenly, the family members who haven't been involved start asking questions. What exactly did the doctor say? Are you sure there's nothing else we can try? Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sometimes these questions turn into accusations. You're just giving up. You're trying to get rid of grandma. Why didn't you involve us earlier? Imagine how that feels to the caregiver. The person who's been there every day, bearing the weight. They often feel defensive and hurt, thinking, where were you? I've been doing this alone, and now you're questioning my decisions. That's exactly where the conflict begins, and it's heartbreaking to witness. What's really going on? It's grief. Julie emphasizes that this fighting comes from a place of grief. It's fear, guilt, and deep sadness. When people are scared and hurting, they often say things they don't truly mean. The emotional turmoil can make even the most loving family members clash. If you're the caregiver, here's what you can do. If you're the one caring for your loved one every day, Nurse Julie has some powerful advice to help ease the tension. Pause before reacting. When you face anger or judgment, try to recognize it for what it is: fear. Instead of responding defensively, say something like, I know this is scary. I'm scared too, but I can only share what the doctor told me. Be clear and kind. Let your family know, I know you've trusted me to handle things so far. I'm doing my best based on what I've learned from the doctors. I need your support, not blame. Call for a family meeting. Julie strongly recommends asking the hospice team, whether it's the social worker, nurse, or doctor, to arrange a family meeting. According to her, everyone who wants to have a say must show up. This meeting gives everyone the chance to hear the same information at the same time, straight from the professionals. It's one of the best ways to stop misunderstandings and reduce conflicts. If you're not the caregiver, what can you do? Maybe you're not the one doing day-to-day care. Maybe you feel left out or confused. Julie's advice to you is just as important. Her advice is for you to listen first. Instead of confronting with, why didn't you tell me sooner? Try something softer like, can you tell me what the doctor said? Or, how are you holding up through all this? Offer specific help. Don't say the vague, let me know if you need anything. Instead, say, can I come by this weekend so you can take a break? Or, can I bring dinner or pick up medicine? Specific offers of help are far easier to accept. Trust the caregiver. Remember, the person caring for your loved one day in and day out is doing their best. They're not perfect, no one is, but respect their role and support them. If you still feel uncertain or have questions, request a meeting with the hospice team. It's okay to seek clarity. Just make sure to approach it constructively. The big picture. What everyone needs to remember. In the middle of all this confusion and emotion, Julie reminds us of one powerful truth. Everyone wants the same thing. When she asks each family member what they truly want for their loved one, the answer is always the same. I just don't want them to suffer. That's the heart of it. So if your family is going through hospice care now, or if it's coming soon, remember, you're not enemies, you're not opponents. You all love the same person. You all want peace and comfort for them. So take a deep breath, speak with love, ask the questions that matter, and don't be afraid to lean on the hospice team. They are there to support your entire family, not just the patient. This brings us to the second nurse on our list, Cathy Truehart, a seasoned hospice nurse and author of The Miracle of Hospice. Truehart brings decades of experience in end-of-life care and has witnessed firsthand how the emotional weight of hospice can reopen wounds that families thought were long healed. She explains that long-standing family tensions often reemerge, sometimes with greater force, during hospice care, especially when siblings or relatives must work together under stress. Truehart notes, unresolved conflicts from years or even decades before may arise again, not only erupting but intensifying. In many cases, family members fall back into childhood roles, such as the responsible one, the absent one, or the emotional one, which can spark resentment or misunderstandings. These roles may seem subtle on the surface, but during emotionally charged hospice decisions, they can escalate quickly. In her book and public talks, Truehart recounts the case of a brother and sister who had barely spoken in years due to a bitter fallout over an inheritance. When their mother entered hospice, they were forced to coordinate care decisions. Despite their shared grief, the old feud reignited almost immediately, this time over which one had the right to make medical choices. The tension grew so intense that care meetings had to be held separately with staff mediating, just to prevent shouting matches. In another case, a daughter who had been estranged from her father for most of her adult life suddenly appeared during his final days, demanding to be involved in every decision. Her siblings, who had been primary caregivers for months, felt hurt and undermined. The result was a volatile environment, where hospice nurses had to focus not only on the patient's comfort, but also on de-escalating near-constant emotional confrontations among the family. Truehart emphasizes that such dynamics are more common than people realize, and that emotional preparation and open communication are just as critical as medical readiness in hospice care. People think the hardest part is letting go, she writes, but often the hardest part is facing what was never resolved. Dr. Donna Wilson, a renowned grief and palliative care researcher at the University of Alberta, has extensively studied the emotional and social dynamics that families undergo when a loved one is dying. Through her comprehensive review of multiple studies and real-life cases, she emphasizes that family disputes during the dying process are far more common than most people realize. Her research indicates that a significant portion of families, sometimes upwards of 40%, experience moderate to severe conflict during end-of-life situations. These disputes often emerge from a potent mix of factors. High stress, emotional exhaustion, unresolved past tensions, and differing beliefs about medical interventions and spiritual or cultural practices can quickly escalate even among otherwise close-knit families. As Wilson notes, decisions about life support, hospice care, and pain management frequently become flashpoints, especially when advance directives are vague or absent. In one of her documented cases, a woman shared how her siblings became embroiled in a bitter argument over whether their father, who was in hospice, should continue aggressive treatment or be allowed to pass peacefully. Despite prior family harmony, deep-seated resentments surfaced. One brother accused the others of giving up too soon, while another sibling threatened legal action to halt the withdrawal of life support. The disagreement was so intense that some family members skipped the funeral, and they have not spoken since. In another case, a daughter was left alone to manage her mother's hospice care, while her estranged brothers, who had been absent for years, suddenly reappeared and began questioning every decision. The emotional burden of caregiving, combined with the pressure of being second-guessed, led to a total breakdown in communication. Wilson highlights this scenario as a prime example of how lack of preparation and communication can deepen family divides during already fragile moments. Dr. Wilson stresses the importance of early and open conversations about end-of-life wishes, involving all key family members where possible. While grief is inevitable, preemptively addressing potential conflict through advanced care planning and family mediation can often ease the burden and protect relationships from irreparable damage. In addition to Julie McFadden, nurse Cathy Truehart, and Dr. Donna Wilson's findings, numerous hospice nurses and doctors have spoken publicly and in research settings about the emotional and interpersonal complexities they witness among families during end-of-life care. Dr. Jessica Zitter, an ICU and palliative care physician and author of Extreme Measures, Finding a Better Path to the End of Life, has long spoken out about the profound emotional and ethical challenges families face when a loved one is nearing death. Through her dual expertise in intensive care and palliative medicine, she has witnessed some of the most heart-wrenching moments that can unfold in the final days of life, especially when medical technology keeps the body alive, while the spirit may be ready to go. One particular case has stayed with her for years. A woman in her late 70s was admitted to the ICU after suffering a massive stroke. She was unresponsive, intubated, and fully dependent on life support. Her prognosis was poor, and according to her medical team, there was virtually no chance of meaningful recovery. But the woman's condition triggered a deep and painful rift among her 3 adult children, each of whom responded to her impending death in a different way. The eldest daughter, Maria, was the most spiritual of the 3. A devoted churchgoer, she firmly believed in the possibility of divine intervention. She insisted on continuing all available life-sustaining treatments, including the ventilator, feeding tube, and medications that kept her mother's blood pressure artificially elevated. "God performs miracles every day," she told the doctors. "We cannot give up on her now." Her younger siblings, Thomas and Renee, were more grounded in what they perceived to be their mother's values and previously expressed wishes. Their mother had often spoken, sometimes even half-jokingly, about not wanting to be hooked up to machines or kept alive like a vegetable. She had never formalized these wishes in a written advance directive, but the siblings felt clear on what she would have wanted. They saw her current condition, unresponsive, unable to communicate or make decisions for herself, as a violation of the dignity she had once cherished. Meetings with the medical team became increasingly tense. Dr. Zitter facilitated a family conference in a small, quiet room off the ICU floor, hoping to create space for a compassionate, clear-headed discussion. She explained the medical reality in plain terms. Their mother had catastrophic brain damage, no signs of neurological recovery, and was likely suffering despite being unable to express it. The continued use of life support, she said gently, might prolong her dying rather than support her living. Maria grew tearful and defensive. "You don't know what God can do," she said. "You doctors don't always have the final say." Thomas tried to remain calm but grew frustrated. "This is not what Mom wanted. You're doing this for you, not for her." The room filled with grief, confusion, and buried pain. Old family dynamics re-emerged, resentments from childhood, disagreements over caregiving responsibilities, even unspoken guilt about not spending enough time with their mother in her final years. "You were never there?" Maria suddenly shouted. "Now you want to pull the plug?" Dr. Zitter later reflected that these outbursts weren't just about the decision at hand. They were expressions of love, guilt, fear, and powerlessness. "People don't fight because they don't care," she wrote in her book. "They fight because they care too much and don't know how to make peace with loss." Eventually, after several days of tearful conversation and counseling with the hospital's ethics team and chaplain, the family reached a painful consensus. They agreed to extubate their mother and transition her to comfort care, surrounded by music, soft lighting, and the touch of their hands. She passed away quietly the following evening. Though the decision was devastating, it also allowed the family a chance at reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, Maria admitted that part of her resistance was rooted in a need to feel like she had done everything, a desire to redeem herself for not being present enough in recent years. "I was afraid of the guilt," she later said. And I thought, if I just believed hard enough, I wouldn't have to face this. For Dr. Zitter, this case reaffirmed that end-of-life conflict is rarely about malice. It's about fear, love, and the human struggle to let go. She advocates for more open conversations about death long before it becomes a medical emergency. We all need to talk about what matters most and write it down, she says. Because if we don't, we leave our loved ones not only to grieve, but to fight. Heather Mayer had been working in hospice for nearly 12 years when she was called in to care for Mr. Allen, a 67-year-old man in the final stages of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. He had been moved into a quiet corner room in a small residential hospice facility in Oregon. By the time Heather joined the care team, Mr. Allen could no longer speak or move on his own. He communicated only through eye movements and subtle facial expressions. A whiteboard next to his bed displayed the few words he could point to with his eyes: yes, no, pain, cold, and stop. From the first day, Heather noticed the tension in the room. Mr. Allen's estranged wife, Marianne, was sitting stiffly in a chair beside his bed when Heather entered. She had been separated from him for over a decade, though never officially divorced. 2 of his 3 adult children, Rachel and David, arrived shortly afterward and barely acknowledged Marianne. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. At first, the disagreements were subtle, strained exchanges about medication, about who should stay overnight, about whether to bring in a chaplain. But within 48 hours, the situation escalated. Rachel accused Marianne of showing up for the glory after years of emotional distance, saying she didn't get to play the grieving wife now. Marianne snapped back that the children had abandoned their father when he got sick, and that she had been helping in ways they hadn't seen, paying bills, making medical decisions behind the scenes. Heather remembers vividly the moment things broke down entirely. Mr. Allen had just received a dose of morphine to ease his muscle spasms. His breathing had settled into a fragile rhythm. That's when the argument exploded. No longer whispered, but shouted across the room. David stood up, pointing a finger at Marianne and yelling, "You're not family anymore. You left him." Marianne stood her ground, her voice cracking as she shouted back, "And where were you when he needed someone to feed him every day? You only showed up when you knew he was dying." Heather rushed in to intervene, trying to redirect everyone's attention to the man lying silently in bed. But it was too late. Mr. Allen, though unable to speak, had tears streaming down his face. His eyes were wide open, and his breathing had become uneven again. "It was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my career," Heather later said. This man had lost almost all control of his body, and now he had to witness the people he loved most unravel in front of him. She gently pulled a curtain between the bed and the arguing parties and asked everyone to step outside. In private, she explained what their fighting was doing to Mr. Allen's final moments and to his spirit. Later that day, Rachel returned quietly with a bouquet of blue irises, her father's favorite flower. She apologized to the staff and to Marianne. The following morning, David arrived with a photo album of their childhood vacations, which he placed by his father's bed. Marianne, too, softened, sitting silently but peacefully in the corner of the room, whispering to Mr. Allen and holding his hand. He passed later that evening, surrounded by a fragile, temporary truce. Heather says this case stuck with her because it showed how pain doesn't vanish when a person is dying. It intensifies, and unresolved family wounds often rise to the surface. "It reminded me that dying isn't just a medical event," she said. "It's a family event. And when we let our old battles take over, we rob the dying person of dignity and peace." To this day, Heather uses that experience in training sessions with younger hospice nurses, reminding them to look beyond symptoms and medications to the emotional ecosystem surrounding every patient. "Our job is not only to care for the person in the bed," she says, "but to guide the whole room toward healing, if even just for a moment." Dr. Ira Byock, a nationally respected palliative care physician and author of The Best Care Possible, has long believed that dying is not just a medical event, but a deeply human, relational experience. In his decades of practice, he has seen firsthand how old wounds, unspoken grief, and tangled family dynamics can surge to the surface during the final days of a loved one's life. One particularly poignant case he shares involved a 73-year-old man named Walter, a retired mechanic, father of 4, who was in the final stages of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Walter had lost the ability to speak and swallow and had been receiving care at home, surrounded by medical equipment and the constant support of hospice staff. As his condition deteriorated, the question arose, should he receive a feeding tube to prolong his life, or be allowed to pass naturally? This decision tore the family apart. Walter's oldest son, Mark, insisted that everything be done to keep his father alive. "He's a fighter," Mark told Dr. Byock. "He'd never want to just give up." Mark's voice was thick with emotion. He'd always felt closest to Walter, often working beside him in the garage as a boy. But he had also been the most absent in recent years, living in another state and visiting infrequently. The 2 middle children, Andrea and James, were more hesitant. Andrea, a nurse herself, knew what a feeding tube would mean. Likely not recovery, but a longer, more drawn-out dying process. "He told me years ago he never wanted machines to keep him alive," she said tearfully. James, quiet and introspective, agreed. "He's not the same anymore. I think he's ready," he said. The youngest sibling, Rachel, was torn. "I just want peace. For him, for us," she whispered in one meeting. She felt crushed under the weight of watching her father suffer and the growing hostility among her siblings. As tensions escalated, Dr. Byock convened a family meeting, not to dictate a course of action, but to facilitate real conversation, to help the family move from surface-level disagreement to what was really beneath it: love, fear, guilt, and pain. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. Held in the family's living room, with Walter in a hospital bed nearby, the conversation began stiffly. But Dr. Byock gently guided them. "Before we talk about the feeding tube," he said, "let's talk about your dad. What do you love about him? What do you remember most?" One by one, stories came out. Andrea recalled how Walter had taught her to ride a bike and carried her on his shoulders after she scraped her knee. James remembered staying up late working on a high school science project with him. Mark grew quiet, then spoke with a cracking voice about how he used to think his father was invincible. "I know I wasn't there much the past few years," he admitted. "I was scared. I didn't want to see him like this." The room softened. Then came forgiveness. Rachel asked Mark why he had been so angry with them lately. Mark finally broke down and admitted he felt like they were giving up too soon, and he didn't want to live with that regret. Andrea reached over and held his hand. Finally, Dr. Byock asked, if Walter could speak now, what would he say? In unison, the children answered, "Let me go." With tears and no further debate, the family made the decision not to proceed with the feeding tube. Instead, they focused on comfort care, reading to him, playing his favorite music, and holding his hand. He died peacefully a few days later, surrounded not by conflict, but by reconciliation and love. Later, Mark wrote a letter to Dr. Byock, thanking him. "You didn't just help my dad die," he wrote. "You helped our family start healing." As Dr. Byock often says, conflict in these moments is often about the past. What was said, what was done, or left undone. When people can air their pain, healing becomes possible, even as someone is dying. This case, like so many others he has witnessed, proves that even in the face of death, human connection can be restored, if we are brave enough to face the truth of our hearts. Sandra Haynes had seen nearly everything in her 15-plus years as a hospice nurse in Florida, but there are still cases that linger with her, stories that refuse to fade with time. One of those was Mr. Alton Rivers, a retired history teacher in his late 70s who had been diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer. By the time he was enrolled in hospice, he had already been through several rounds of chemotherapy and multiple hospitalizations. He had lost weight rapidly and could barely speak above a whisper, but his mind was still sharp. From the beginning, Alton made it clear he was ready. He told the hospice team, "I've lived a good life. I've made my peace." His daughter, Mia, a calm and grounded school principal in her 40s, supported his decision to focus on comfort and dignity rather than more aggressive treatment. But his son, Brandon, 38, a former Marine turned entrepreneur, couldn't accept it. From the moment Sandra first met him, she saw the storm behind his eyes. "We don't quit in my family," he said, pacing in the hallway during their first hospice intake meeting. "He just needs more time, a second opinion." maybe a specialist in Miami. Brandon's denial turned into disruption. During one of Sandra's early visits, he challenged the hospice plan, accusing the nurses of giving up too soon. Despite repeated explanations from doctors and social workers that his father's body was shutting down, Brandon insisted on calling 911 multiple times, even as his father lay in bed, weakly shaking his head in protest. Paramedics, obligated to respond, would arrive, check vital signs, and leave frustrated. The hospice team tried everything: educational materials, family meetings, and even bringing in a chaplain. But Brandon's grief was manifesting as resistance. One afternoon, Sandra walked into the home and found Mr. Rivers crying silently as Brandon yelled on the phone with a friend, demanding to get a real doctor in here. Mia was sitting beside her father, holding his frail hand. It was then that Alton, with difficulty and in a barely audible voice, turned to Sandra and said, "Please, no more chaos. I want peace. Just Mia now." It was one of the hardest decisions Sandra had ever had to help enforce. She gently explained the request to Brandon, who exploded in anger. "He's not thinking straight," he shouted. "You're manipulating him. You're killing him." Sandra remained calm, professional, and firm. "Your father is of sound mind. This is his decision. Our job is to honor his wishes, even when it's painful." For the next 5 days, Brandon did not return. During that time, Alton became more peaceful. He and Mia shared long, quiet hours together, listening to old jazz records, reading poetry aloud, and going through photo albums. On his final morning, Mia said her father smiled one last time and whispered, "Thank you for letting me go my way." At the funeral, Brandon stood in the back, arms crossed, silent. He didn't speak to Mia and left immediately afterward. Sandra says that situation still comes to mind when she talks to new hospice nurses about the emotional terrain they must navigate. "You can have a perfectly planned medical approach," she says, "but if the family isn't emotionally prepared, you're in for a storm. And sometimes that storm never passes." Years later, Sandra heard from Mia. She had tried to reconnect with her brother multiple times, but he never responded. She said she had made peace with that, just as her father had made peace with death. "Some people carry grief as a weapon," Mia wrote, "but I chose to carry it as a lesson." This story illustrates not only the medical complexity of hospice care, but the deeply human drama that often plays out in those final days, where love, pain, guilt, and old wounds converge in ways no one can predict. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own experiences with family, hospice, or end-of-life care, I invite you to share your thoughts or stories in the comments. Have you or someone you know faced family tension during a loved one's final days? How did it shape your grief or your relationships afterward? Let's start a compassionate conversation below. Your voice might help someone else feel seen or supported in their journey. Thank you for listening. Many blessings to you and your family.